The Indian Republic is passing through a moment of immense crisis of democracy, of a depth, of a ferocity, and of a range unmatched in the 75 years of the existence of India as an independent modern nation. The only parallels with this crisis are India's 18-month emergency in the 1970s. There are many similarities. There was an abridgment of fundamental rights and freedoms, large-scale jailing of the political opposition, and suspension of the media and of judicial independence. All of these we do see in the India of today, in what is described by many as an undeclared emergency. But because it is undeclared, it is so much more sinister. Unlike the earlier emergency, it has no end date. It has a much wider, deeper social base. And it is characterized by runaway crony capitalism. And above all, most gravely, it is a hate project. In the few minutes I have with you, let me talk about what I see as the most worrying threats to India's democracy. The earlier speakers have spoken about what I would describe as an open war of the state against India's Muslims and Dalits, to reduce them to a life of fear, to be subject routinely to abuse, bigotry from the official leadership, violence by vigilante groups condoned by the police, and laws which formally give lesser rights to citizenship based on their religious and caste identity. Let me take just a few prominent markers. One of them is absolutely runaway hate speech, what one could call VIP hate speech. Hate speech is given by the Union Home Minister, by chief ministers, which are openly full of bigotry, taunting India's minorities, particularly India's Muslims. It's important to remember the lessons of history, the recent history. It has been said that the Holocaust did not begin in the gas chambers. They began in hate speech. And in that sense, we are hurtling towards something very grave by how commonplace hate speech against India's Muslims has become. We see the changing of road names, city names, anything that reflects our common Islamic identity is sought to be erased. Although we have 200 million Muslim residents, equal citizens in every way, and we have a civilization of shared, of a shared culture, very rich shared culture, where the Islamic contributions are closely tied with those that preceded and followed. We're seeing gang rapes with no justice of teenage Dalit girls. We're seeing, perhaps most frighteningly, the project of lynching. This mob lynching from the year 2016-17, mobs gathering and beating to death publicly, mostly Muslim men, sometimes Dalit men, in the name of protecting the cow. There was a stunning silence of the majority community, and a continuous condoning of this by people in power, which is why we launched what I called the Karwan-e-Mohabbat. This was really a caravan of love. We resolved that we would go to every home where somebody has been lost to hate violence, to say that there are many people in this country who care, and that you're not alone, that we seek forgiveness for what we become as a country. We are with you in your battles for justice and to rebuild your lives, and we will tell your story. We had started with a journey of 1 month, but we realized how much it meant. And we continued right up to the time of the lockdown. We made about 30 journeys to far corners of the country, to the homes. And what we saw was terrifying by any standards. The similarities actually with the lynching of African Americans from the late 19th to almost the mid 20th century are very striking, because these were performative acts of violence. We were struck by the extreme cruelty, firstly, of the violence. Families would say, I wish they just shot him. I wish they just knifed him to death. Why did they torture him so much? Why did they gouge out his eyes, smash his genitals? The same cruelty, again, that we saw in the lynchings in America. But the performative character was replaced not by large gatherings, but by the video camera. Each of these lynchings are videotaped with the perpetrators clearly visible and widely circulated and consumed on WhatsApp to settle fear in some hearts and hate in others. The role of the police is extremely partisan. We found everywhere, and there was a sort of a frightening silence by people of the majority community. We're seeing, what are called love jihad laws, which make interfaith marriages subject of criminal investigation by adults, with frightening echoes of the Nuremberg laws. I could go on. But there are other wars as well. There's a war against informal labor, the pandemic. We had the harshest, biggest lockdown in the world, probably in human history, with among the smallest relief packages. But what is really important to know is that when the Prime Minister asks us to stay at home, we have to have a home. If he says keep social distance, how will people who live in one-room shanties, 10 people, how are they going to keep social distance and so on? 9 out of 10 workers are informal workers. So even the design of what the state wanted to try to do during the lockdown excluded the poor, but it's placed the greatest burdens on their shoulders. There's the breakdown of all institutions of a democracy. Just take a few examples. The higher judiciary has been far less conspicuous in defending the rights of minorities. There's the Election Commission, which we were very proud of for its independence. It's got more and more eroded. A group of retired civil servants called the Constitutional Conduct Group is investigating and finding troubling evidence of partisanship by the Election Commission, the higher civil services and the police, and of course the media. And with all of this, I must mention briefly, Assam, it has been mentioned earlier as well, and the report led by Angana, I put out the link. But I think that it's important to see that this as probably the biggest project in a modern democracy for creating statelessness, or for actually shifting the blame, the burden to prove that you're not an illegal immigrant, on people to produce documents 50 years, 60 years old to prove that your ancestors belong to this country. I wouldn't be able to produce those documents in a country with very little history of documentation and the kind of distress it created. And then, of course, the jailing of dissidents, charging them with the gravest crimes of terror or very serious financial crimes that could lead, if proved, to sending people in prison for the rest of their lives. We heard of Father Stan Swami, a great hero, completely unbroken at that age for his fight for justice. And we have a lot of very wonderful, idealistic young people spending years in jail with little hope of release. The only hope has been solidarity that was displayed in nationwide battles against the citizenship law and now in the farmers' protests. The protests were founded on fraternity, on Hindu-Muslim unity, and a new idiom of resistance which is founded on love and non-violence. that can be traced to what is found in our freedom struggle. Thank you.